Hi, and welcome to New God Sunday School. I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. And in the show notes below, there's a pre-order link to pre-order that book. And at that same link, you can also pre-order my other book, Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics. Stan Lee is very apropos to this issue. This is probably the most famous issue of Mr. Miracle. It's the Funky Flashman issue. Now, Funky is mentioned on the cover, but he's not shown. It's more of sort of a generic escape situation that Mr. Miracle's involved in. This could almost be the cover for any issue of the series. This would also make an interesting poster. Introducing Funky Flashman, villain or hero, you decide. Oh yeah, Funky Flashman is what makes this such a famous issue. This is Jack Kirby's Funky is, I guess the FF is like, Fantastic Four or something, but Funky Flashman is sort of based on Stan Lee. And it's kind of, the Stan Lee, Jack Kirby breakup was still pretty fresh. He left Marvel in 1970, and this is 1972. Definitely casts a new light on their relationship, sort of, seeing it from Kirby's perspective. And of course, he's, creating a character for a comic book and trying to make it as entertaining and interesting as possible. But, this is probably the most scathing depiction of, one comic person depicting another comics person ever seen, in a comic. I'd heard about this story before I'd ever read it, and yet it is, it's powerful. It's a very powerful story, and I think Jack, sort of channeled his, frustrations and his anger with Stan Lee and just the whole Marvel situation in general, and sublimated it into great art. This is one of the great issues, and plot-wise, there's not a ton happening here. Like, this doesn't move the story forward in any kind of demonstrable way, but it just, just introduces, such an interesting character and an interesting perspective on Mr. Miracle's whole situation and just sort of like, showbiz in general. In the shadow world between success and failure, there lives the driven little man who dreams of having it all, the opportunistic spoiler without character or values, who preys on all things like a cannibal, including you. Like death and taxes, we must all deal with him sometime. That's why, in this issue, we go where he lives, in the decaying antebellum grandeur of the Mockingbird estates, and wait for Godot with Funky Flashman. The Mockingbird estates, I'm assuming, like, Kirby chose an M word because it's Marvel. It should happen any second, Master Funky. I must admit that old Colonel Mockingbird chose a weird manner to dole out your weekly allowance. At least I don't have to work for it, dope. But I wish I could get my hands on the whole caboodle of cash he hid in the house when he passed away. And so I guess this is supposed to be, Martin Goodman, the sort of nepotism, sponsor of Stan Lee. As far as likenesses go, there aren't a ton of pictures of Martin Goodman, but this looks more like Vince Colletta to me than Martin Goodman. And so, just like a really clever concept that every week Funky Flashman gets his allowance doled out to him in the mouth of a bust of his rich uncle, and that the money is hidden throughout the house and then just gets dispensed in there. And if he can find the source of the money, then he could have a little more freedom. At the traditional moment, the old colonel's statue makes the familiar sound, which signifies that money has been transferred from its hidden source to the statue's opening mouth. I suppose he didn't want me to forget who's holding the purse strings. Kirby gets to have a lot of fun. First of all, he's, lampooning, Stan's, sort of 60s makeover, putting on a very hirsute wig, and then adding to that the idea of even Stan's beard being an application, being fake, just like, really ripping him a new one. But the part where Kirby's like really having fun is is the way he, and of course, this is supposed to be Roy Thomas. When Kirby's writing Stan Lee's or Funky Flashman's fanciful dialogue, his really purple pronouncements, you can tell he's like really having fun. By the power and the glory and the pathos that's Funky Flashman. It's true, House Roy. It's when you little people reach out to me that my spirits soar. To know you is to love you, sir. Roy Thomas looks a little like the writer of the song To Know You Is to Love You, Phil Spector. Looks a lot like a young Phil Spector. I don't know how conscious that is. Funky is always looking for a new prospect, and he finds a new prospect in the form of Scott Free. He's going to see if he can go into business with Scott Free. His gimmicks imply great risk. This venture could end quickly. So he breaks a leg or dies. I'll just sip my martini by the ocean and wait for the next fish to jump. The world will take you to its heart, sir. That's if you don't make too many slip-ups. I must tell you that there are times when the real Master Funky comes through with shocking results. And don't you forget it, sweetie. Just keep your place and don't bug Master Funky with advice. As you wish, sir. So Funky has a dark side. And so now we got the setup of, Mr. Miracle testing out one of his stunts. They're always state-of-the-art. This time it's like a rocket sled, something you'd see in a James Bond movie. And the rocket sled takes off and boom, it explodes. But if you're paying careful attention, you can see just a little bit of his boot as his ejection seat works. Now, Oberon, thinks he's dead, but there he is, parachuting down safely. And he's talking about, we got to get this show on the road. We got to start making some money with this act. Part of the reason to go on tour is to evade, his sort of enemies from Apocalypse who keep trying to drag him back. Touring means being constantly on the move, Oberon. That's what's important. We must become mobile. I would have liked to have seen, the story, get to that point, maybe, with some kind of cool vehicle that they travel around in. Or when I was working on Superpowers, I was working with Thaddeus Brown, the Golden Age Mr. Miracle. I only managed to get one panel of it into print, but it was a very dense panel with a lot going on, and he traveled through World War II era Europe in a circus train. So maybe Scott Free could be in some sort of high-tech 70s circus train. Hire me, DC. So now we get this great scene of Barda and Funky there, and Funky is very smarmy in this scene. Earth weapons, primitive on Apocalypse, but effective here. Easy to handle, too. Make love, not war, chickie. You're packing more ammo than you can put in that gun. If you've come to see Scott Free, mister, just keep your thoughts on Scott Free. Oh, that's good, chickie. That's good. Women's lib dialogue and Bonnie Parker talent. Great, chickie. Great act. But I can't use you. Perhaps you can audition for me again sometime when you acquire more class. Anything hanging on a meat hook would meet your standards, Mr. Wonderful. Say, you didn't get here by boom tube, did you? From Apocalypse, perhaps. Kirby using a little bit of California Valley speak. Really, really great acting, well-chosen dialogue. Nah, you're strictly an Earth product. I can tell by the blank stare. But you're not bad for a cheap imitation of us. So yeah, I like this idea that she's trying to figure out what Funky's deal is. And he seems like he might be from Apocalypse. He's got kind of a flamboyant approach, Vermin Wunderbar or somebody. But no, he's not quite that level, but he is sort of approximating the kind of, the kind of characters that come from Apocalypse. Chickie, booby, baby, did you think for 1 minute that bitty buddy Funky would be unkind to, you? The gun bit kind of changed your line, eh? Smart move, Funky. That was real steel. Think what I could do to bone and gristle. Great scene. Amazing scene. Crazy lady. I'd like to rebuild this and... why don't you go and report to your drill sergeant? You're a classic, Funky. Ego, ignorance, and hostility. A real powerhouse. If you'll excuse me, I'll go and take a bath. He's so gross. She's got to go take a bath after being around him. And now Scott's here. Well, you must be Mr. Flashman. Have you been waiting long, sir? What matter, great wizard? On a day when wondrous feats poise on the brink of creation. And this fantastic elfin creature can be none other than Oberon, mentioned briefly in your letter. Some great, physical comedy here as Funky is winding up to kick Oberon, as Oberon says, "How much sugar in your coffee, Mr. Flashman? 1 lump or 2? Ah, what a tingly-wingly thrill to actually be in the very setting where the hallowed Thaddeus Brown, like a warlock of ancient yore, conjured up his mystic manipulations." Oh, so you boned up on Thaddeus. Yes, he was a great escape artist. To be frank, I've sort of inherited his mantle, so to speak. Please sit down. Let me study the face of a man with the daring and dash to carry on this exciting yet somber tradition, this passion play in the garden of death. I love that line. I mean, Stan Lee he cartooned himself. He turned himself into a living cartoon. And he has this very flamboyant writing style that's just so much fun. And even in parodying him or sort of conjuring him up, it does add like a real spice. Like this issue, his presence really makes the whole thing crackle and come alive. He's not coming there with artillery or any kind of like trap or gimmick or anything. He's just there with sort of pure, flash and charisma, and adds an element. And again, like the uncertainty is interesting, that he's not quite a villain. It just it's this X element. It's just like a really wonderful addition to the series, and sort of an unforgettable character. And played a big role in Mark Evaniers and Steve Rude's Mr. Miracle, and plays a big role in Tom King's Mr. Miracle. And he only shows up in this one issue. In the Kirby run, you only see him this one time. You would assume that he had like a whole career with him, but no, he's just in this one issue and just, makes an incredible impression. And I know Jack Kirby, came to regret this issue, but I mean, it's, he's taken his real life experiences and created great art out of it. And, I wish he would have done more of these. I wish he would have done more I wish he would have, parodied Stan Lee every couple of issues, or maybe, moved on to some other people, because it crackles. It crackles. Like there's no fist fight going on here. There's no life or death struggle. It's all just very subtle, but very intense and riveting. And just the way he brings out certain elements within the established cast. You do have a way with words, Mr. Flashman. I tell you, I tested that phrase on my man Houseroy, and the beggar literally cried. But call me Funky, sir, I prithee, for what is a name but the opening gun of mutual enterprise? Yes, nicely put, Funky. Great comedy. And now Mark Evanier says he wrote this bath scene because they sort of came up a page short, that Bartek goes upstairs, probably said something different, like, "Oh, I'm gonna leave," and then this is where you would see her next. But they were a page short on the issue, so Jack asked Mark to write something up, and he wrote this scene, and so I guess modified the dialogue to sort of lead into this with her saying the thing about she needs a bath, which is pretty great. And so it's a little bit of cheesecake, but it's also like a nice quiet moment. Like that's this issue is just full of like these really great, compelling, quiet moments. Everything doesn't have to be storm and drang every second, and like the quiet moments in a Kirby comic are just so compelling and crackle with life. And so she gets to be sort of introspective for a little bit, and then there's something in the air, something going on, and then we get this really great sort of jump scare, this horror reveal of this sort of ghastly face of Mad Harriet, and so we get introduced to Barta's crew in this issue, her old battalion. Mad Harriet has sort of like these Wolverine, spiky nails that she can cut through things with, and then Stompa shows up. She's kind of like Gorgon of the Inhumans, with these stomping boots that can cause seismic shocks. And then they're gone as quickly as they arrived. The team's, talking it out. There's like a coloring error here where they colored Barda's belt red, but they didn't color her bathing suit red. So this is, kind of, like an R-rated, Jack Kirby panel. If you want to see a naked from the waist down Big Barda, Jack Kirby provides. And now they're on the set, practicing in a rehearsal studio, and Funky has his costume change. Just great. Wearing something, you'd see like Charlton Heston wear. This is more like it, eh, friends? The smell of grease paint, the trappings of showbiz. Up, curtain on our star. I'm ready to go, Funky. And so we get this like buzzsaw. And Funky Flashman, who's sort of seen it all, is very impressed with, Scott Free's act. Great harbingers of the Holocaust. He's moving into that blade, tied up like a steer. The nuts committing suicide. Step on your tongue. Work, Scott, work. And of course, Scott, gets free in time. Oh, glorious galactic. What does one say to the ninth wonder of the world? You would do that again? Well, I have variations. The big bowl is one. And so he gets in this, like, bowl. I see. You just stay in there and die. And Oberon tightens the top, and then a bomb drops in from the lid, and poof. But Mr. Miracle's okay. That looked dramatic, Funky, but a good performer curling up in the proper position. Say no more. Your act is sensational. Glad I wore my uneasy rider outfit today. We'll rediscover America together, superstar. You and folksy to a fault, Funky. I love that uneasy rider outfit. Bolts of Zeus! I can't believe it's all just slipping out of bonds and split-second timing. Is there something else you employ, Great One? Well, there's Motherbox. She helps, but she doesn't do it all. But no one can build her. She must be earned. Why, of course everybody knows that. And Funky is very charmed by the Motherbox. And then we get another member of Barda's crew. So we get, Kirby is an endless font of invention. There's no creative constipation. It is a constant flow of incredible superstar characters. You got Funky in this issue. You have Mad Harriet, Lashina, Stompa. Like, I don't know why anybody would ever get in Jack Kirby's way, but you'll see when the series gets canceled. And so Lashina comes out, and Barda fights her, and Lashina is, pretty tough. She's got a great costume. And Barda defeats her, and she phases out too. I hustled Flashman out as quickly as possible. Are you all right? Barda has figured out that they've been homing in on the mother box and homing in on her, side panels, the circuits. That's what they've been using to track and phase in. And Scott realizes about the mother box. Funky Flashman has it. I got rid of him so fast he didn't have time to return it to me. And Oberon gets a chuckle out of that thought. If it isn't a musical sardine can, what the hell is it? I pass, sir. Scot-free is a weirdo, that's what. Imagine staking one's life on a tin can. It's time to listen to the tapes of your voice. Now there's an instrument for you, Houseroy, the voice of Funky Flashman. I tell you, its dulcet tones are soon to ring over the land. And that was a story that Jack Kirby tells, and he says it was kind of like the last straw for him. He was at the Marvel offices one night, and Stan Lee was sitting in the dark, talking into a tape recorder and like listening to his own, and like grooving to the sound of his own voice. And Kirby was like, I've created a monster. Of course I'll need things to say, but why worry about that? All the great words and quotations and cliches ever written are at my beck and call. Even if I say them sideways, the little people will listen in wonder, in awe, in reverence to their Funky. Don't be overcome, sir. Just relax and listen. The whole crew, the whole evil crew shows up. We get a better look at Stompa than we've seen previously. We see Mad Harriet and Lashina, but then we also have a new one, Bernadette. She's sister of Desaad. her Farron knife. As sister of great Desaad, I demand prior right to him. My Farron knife will penetrate dimensionally and barbecue him from the inside. And Funky throws Roy Thomas to the wolves. And Roy Thomas cited that as why, he didn't get too bummed out by, Kirby, making fun of him in this issue. Because he said, he ends up being kind of a sympathetic character. He gets thrown to the wolves by Funky. Worry not, noble warrior. I know your valor will stem the tide until the local fuzz arrive. And, Funky's, as Funky is like sort of showing his dark side, taking a leader's privilege, biddy buddy, I'm sending in the troops. As he's sort of showing his dark side, we start to see, the facade that he's built up, come apart and come to tatters. And now, it's all, we're back to, Stan Lee in like the early 60s before his makeover. Cosmic catastrophes, those nuts have dynamited the house. Sort of like a vaudevillian character. He's kind of ready to start all over again. His whole life destroyed, ready to start all over again. And Scott Free has rescued Roy Thomas, and they decide our battle is with the forces of apocalypse and with ourselves. We had the courage to break free of them. Do we dare to return and face them down? If we dare, we die. Well, I'm a soldier, Scott. I'm trained to die, but you're beautiful inside. They never got to you, and now they'll do things to you. Enough, Barda. There's no freedom in running. I'm going back and win it their way. In trial by combat. So, the story's moving in a very interesting direction. And in the next couple issues, Scott Free and Barda go back to Apocalypse to settle all their business once and for all. So Scott, he tried to run away and he couldn't run away. He's got to go back, face things, and be done with this, sort of ongoing harassment from Apocalypse once and for all. Just great development, really, just a great story all around. What kind of world is it that spawns gods of evil and lesser beings with horribly hostile hang-ups? You've seen some of its nasty products. Now come along with Scott Free and Big Barda and take a fearful glimpse of the Apocalypse Trap, appearing next issue. So great stuff. So as a bonus, we get this really beautiful, amazing young Scott Free story, a 2-pager, and we have Mike Royer's inks on it, and it looks like $1 million. Granny, rendered by Mike Royer for the first time, and she's terrifying, on this view screen. Mr. Miracles are not made overnight. Sometimes they're in place where they must be jolted and wrenched and brought to the crossroads of destiny. For reasons of his own, Metron, the enigmatic knowledge seeker, began this process in the realm of Darkside, in the Iron Institution run by Granny Goodness, and in another small segment of the early life of young Scott Free. And they're eating in this very ordered manner. And now, by the numbers, Granny's deadly little darlings will eat their energy blocks, or I'll ram it down your darling throats. You're not a beast if you kill for Darkside. You're not a liar if you lie for Darkside. Ready utensil, down utensil. Don't eat that, Scott. It's saturated with brain drain chemical. What? That voice. It's the same voice I heard in the punishment cell. That damnable phantom, the one who calls himself Metron. Your mind must be clear, boy. It must be at its sharpest. You see, it belongs to you. Die for Granny, and she will live for you. Cruelty breeds respect. Scott Free owns your mind. Who is Scott Free? Would you die for idols before you discovered Scott Free? Shut up, shut up, shut up! There he goes, shouting at the empty air again. That punishment cell must have rattled him. Scott Free had inherited an unseen gadfly voice, and on the world of Apocalypse, that was dangerous. Great little vignette here, another piece of this ongoing backup story that's going to culminate into the main story in issue 9. Just really wonderful stuff. Kirby was, in sort of, in the comics medium and in the superhero genre, Jack Kirby was creating great literature, and I hope you'll join me for the next issue. I'm Tom Scioli, author of I Am Stan, a graphic biography of the legendary Stan Lee. And in the show notes below, you'll be able to find a pre-order link where you can pre-order that book. And at that same link, you can pre-order Jack Kirby, The Epic Life of the King of Comics in softcover. And you can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli or on Instagram at Tom_Scioli. And please support my Patreon. Go to patreon.com, search Tom Scioli. And if you become a patron, you'll have full access to the archives as well as new comics and artwork as I post them. Thank you for joining me for New God Sunday School.